Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fire Up Florida. My name is Scott Morgan, off the Motor City Bandmouth, and we're going back to school today. And I mean, we're literally going back to school today. And when I say we're going back to school today, we're going to Gainesville, Florida. Well, kind of, but yeah, we are. And I'm pleased to introduce a brand new guest, John Carosello. John, very glad to have you on Fire Up Florida and looking forward to a lot of your insights today.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, for having me.
You're very welcome. And we're bringing back a couple of the old crew here. Avi Greenwald. Welcome back, Avi.
Appreciate it. It's always an honor, Scott. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Madman Mancini, otherwise known as Guinness Book of World Records and everything else that goes in between. We can call him Guinness. We can call him Froggy. But you doesn't have to call me Johnson. If that's trademark, so be it. I can get away with it. It's a one-liner anyways. Welcome back, Mancini.
Well, I'm wearing a T-shirt that says #blessed. So
okay.
All the way around, man.
All right. Well, we're going to have a pretty lively broadcast tonight. That's for sure. And John's going to be my relief pitcher since I'm getting a little raspy, but then again, he should be because most of what we're talking about is up his wheelhouse anyway. So just to give everybody an overview of what's going on here, we'll be talking about the Gators win against Missouri. But before I get around to that, I want to talk about some promotional things at the beginning. Subscribe to the South Florida Tribune on our YouTube channel or visit www.southfloridatribune.com and follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. John should know because he followed me. We follow each other back, and that's why he's on tonight. To advertise, call 954-304-4941. The audio portion of the show can be heard on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you can't find us through the website, just go over to youtube.com, look for South Florida Tribune, and let your finger do the walk into the subscribe button, click it, and boom, then you get all the information you want of all our future shows. With that said, okay, as I mentioned before, John, we're so glad to have you. We're going to talk about the Gators against Missouri, and then, of course, fan base expectations. We're going to dive into the pros a little bit about the Miami Dolphins quarterback situation. Then we're going to go across I-10 to Florida State with Seminoles, and time permitting, we'll even talk about Dan Mullen because during pre-pro, John had some pretty good information with that. I'll go over a couple things, and then John can go ahead and pick it up from there. The Gators defeated Missouri 24-17. The Gators currently sit 4-2. The Gators don't have an identity 6 games into the Billy Napier era, and many thought it would actually be the Anthony Richardson show, but Richardson has at least 1 turnover in 5 consecutive games. Florida can't stop the run. It has little prowess. All right, I know that the Gators go ahead and take on LSU on Saturday. So with that said, okay, John, take it away.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. In the beginning of the season, I don't think anybody was expecting, first of all, to beat Utah. So I think some of the identity crisis stems from the fact that we weren't supposed to beat Utah. And many of us, I think, preseason, a lot of the fan base would have said 4-2 would be great right now. We just wouldn't have picked the games that we lost necessarily. I think everybody was expecting to lose to number 7 Utah at the time. And the fact that we didn't, it changed everything in the minds of Florida fans. I was at the Swamp that night. It was unbelievable. I wrote about it and was talking about how the feeling in the stadium took me back to 2006. I mean, it was just that kind of energy. You had this incredible quarterback who was playing lights out. He was automatically being talked about a Heisman candidate immediately following the game. The NFL was drooling over him, talking about where he would go in the draft. I mean, it was insane, and it was instant until the next week. And so once we went into the next week, and then we started seeing all these different problems that were really there against Utah. But, thanks to Bernie's late interception in the end zone to seal the victory against Utah, there was a lot of things that we didn't see. We were just kind of in this honeymoon period, and looking with rose shades because all we could see is the fact that we just beat Utah. We're back, and all of that excitement that went with it. Since then, we've seen the reality of what I think a lot of Florida fans really expected to see before the season began. Billy Napier came in here he's inherited these players. He's come in here with a whole different philosophy. He is a hard hat, lunch pail kind of guy. He is not about flash. He is not about gimmicks. Dan Mullen would get beat, and then he'd show up at a press conference and talk about how great his offense was, how great his game plan was. He didn't care if the other team put up 176 points. His offense was great. But Billy Napier's not that way. It's a completely different culture now. And so I think that what we're seeing in terms of the identity crisis is really par for the course. I likened it in an article that I just published today to a construction crew on the road. You go out, you see all the cones, and every single day, if you live around an area of highway that's being worked on, every day it looks the same. There's cones, there's people, there's noise, there's mess. But beneath the surface, things are changing, they're expanding, and they're getting ready to support an infrastructure that's really going to make a highway for where you want to get it, where you want to go. And I believe that's what Billy Napier is doing right now in Florida.
Well, I got to tell you, when I watched that Utah game, I was pulling hard for the Gators. I was. I mean, you talk about a guy who actually, his first game against a marquee opponent, and to see him beat Utah, I think Utah was favored in that, weren't they?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Right. So then he comes out with a bang, so to speak. And, when you talk about first impressions being what they are, he definitely did. A few things in the chat room. Ralph Williams, good to see you again. And how you doing, Will Vogel? And I should mention Will Vogel is going to be one of the newest additions on 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. So thanks a lot, Will, for tuning in. I have a lot of new people I'm bringing on. Obviously, John, you're just the latest of a lot that we have going on. So getting back to the Florida-Utah game, what was the energy like, after that? Because that was a really exciting contest that nobody expected to win. I mean, I hate to pick on one game, but as I mentioned, when you talk about first impressions, that was an awfully good one.
Oh, yeah, it was amazing. And it was meme central from the fan base after that, talking about Billy Napier, just glorifying Billy Napier. But, the atmosphere leaving Ben Hill Griffin Stadium that night, it was like 2006. The only thing I can say, I saw grown men crying. It was interesting. It was magical in a way. I mean, it really was. It's something that you don't see very often. But to me, as a Florida fan who's gone, 2 games year after year, there was all of a sudden like new life in the Florida program that I think we've been craving and looking for since Meyer's departure. And even under Mullen, I wrote about this as well, talking about that Alabama game that Florida almost won at the beginning of last year against Alabama. The whole atmosphere felt like we were going to lose that game the entire time. It just felt like we were going to lose. And against Utah, it felt like we were going to win the entire time. That's the best way I can describe it. I've had a lot of fans affirm and say it's exactly how I felt. I'm like, it's just a different environment now.
You ever met Billy Napier yet?
I have not met him yet, no.
No, I'm sure you'll look forward to time. So before I turn it over to Avi and Madman, okay, they face LSU Saturday, and I can tell you one thing about LSU. That Brian Kelly has the worst Southern accent that I have ever seen. And if that isn't good enough, okay, because it is horrible.
Right? It's bad.
But this guy here is going to get – I'll say this because you're a Gator anyway, so you probably agree with me. I might make a few friends in Gainesville. Brian Kelly's going to eat humble pie in the SEC as he did when he was with Notre Dame. I really believe that's the case. And, I wouldn't mind if – Florida goes out there and makes them eat lemon meringue pie, and we all know lemons aren't very good, especially if you have to drive them out the parking lot. So with that, again, the analogies are coming out with the way they are. So give me your thoughts about the Florida LSU game up ahead on Saturday.
Yeah, so LSU has they've become more and more of a rival for Florida as time has gone on. Florida currently leads the series by 1 game. And with what happened, and there's been so many controversial plays that have ended up winning games, and Marco Wilson throwing the shoe, and there's just so much history between Florida and LSU, especially the last 15 years. It's going to be a hard-fought game. We just saw Tennessee blow their socks off 40-10 in Baton Rouge. So I believe that LSU is probably going to come with a chip on their shoulder to Gainesville. But I know that the atmosphere in the Swamp is going to be unbelievable. And I think that I think there's a bad taste in a lot of upperclassmen's mouth from what's happened with LSU. I don't know if it'll be a blowout, but I do think that Florida will win the game by 10 or more. Probably 10 is my pick.
Okay, well, listen, you're an expert up there anyway, so I can definitely respect. Well, you are more of an expert than any of us are, so I'm definitely going to take your word heavily. All right, Avi, I know that John's giving you a lot to bite off here, so give me some early impressions of the Florida Gators so far, Avi.
Well, as we were speaking earlier, we were mentioning about the Gators' identity. The Gators' identity, I think, at this point, really is to outsmart their opponents. And it's behind their play calling, especially on their offense. I think what they have good for themselves going forward, their true identity on offense is designed to create mismatches and confusion. Counter runs when defenses are being over-aggressive, etc. What's important is kind of chaining plays together that are similar but different. A lot of motion, a lot of fakes. I've been seeing a lot of that. So if we had to really say that they had some kind of identity, I'd say it was behind their play calling. That was something that Napier really talked about when he got on hired, is that they needed to find an identity. So if you had to really kind of say what kind of identity they have, I would definitely say it's their play calling right now. They're definitely creating mismatches for their opponents and being really aggressive with that. So I definitely like what I see going forward. They definitely got a big hill to climb with LSU next week, though. So we'll see what happens.
Well, just jump in real quick there. Last week, one of the most encouraging things that I saw was one penalty from Florida. You don't understand, like, that is monumental. As a Gators fan, that never happens. One penalty for 5 yards. Last year, we were second worst in the SEC in penalties. I think we had like 114, 120 penalties. It was ridiculous. To see that, I agree with what you're saying, Avi, with the play calling. I think that with fans, a lot of people have even come out and said, listen, Napier can't go on the field and execute these plays. He's calling the right plays. They're just not being executed well, and that's not on him necessarily, just because receiver can't catch a fastball. It's like, what do you do? He's doing great. So I would say play calling, like you do. I totally agree with you, and I would add discipline. I think the discipline is what has stood out to me in terms of who is this team becoming. Discipline is amazing. We have almost the same number of turnovers right now, halfway through the season, that we did all season last year. And that again, it's discipline being in the right position at the right time. So I think that's a really astute position on your end. And I would just add to that, discipline is what I'm seeing, and I'm excited about that.
Mark, any thoughts?
Well, I think you bring up interesting points, Avi and John, and to go along with discipline has to be accountability.
Yeah.
This is a team that I saw for years that was built on being in this thing top to bottom all the way, and I don't know what's happened to this team. If you want to compete with an Alabama, it's not so much wins and losses each year. I think it's progress instead of regressing.
100%.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, so you know what? Let's turn over to fan base expectations, John. When we talked earlier today, you have a pulse on it? Tell me.
Yeah. And really, Mancini just said it perfectly. I said in the beginning of the season that kind of writing and putting it out there to the fans is, I think that the appropriate expectations for us is to look for progress. That's it. All I want to see is improvement week to week. It doesn't matter. You said exactly what I did, Mancini. It doesn't matter how many we lose, as long as we're falling forward and we're getting better and better each week. That's all I want to see. If you see the team getting worse every week, if you see stupid, boneheaded plays and penalties just continuing to accumulate and rise, that's what would be concerning. Nick Saban, 6-6 his first year at Alabama in the regular season, including a loss to Louisiana Monroe, which was humiliating for Alabama. But you know what? They were eliminating penalties, they were causing turnovers, and they were getting better. It was just one of those things where it was a slow grind. So I think the problem with Florida fans, is our fan base has come under immense scrutiny, including from players' parents. Trevor Etienne's mom came out and blasted the fan base just a couple weeks ago, made wide circulation talking about how toxic it is and talking about, how unreasonable Florida fans are. And she had a point. Not everything she was saying was just, hyperbole. She had a point. There's a lot of fans that are that way. As a matter of fact, just to give you a taste of it, there were fans talking about how we need to bench AR and play Kitna on Saturday.
Wow.
I mean, I'm still just bewildered that anybody would even say something like that. But there was a pocket of fans that apparently still do, because I put a poll out on Twitter, that still think that that's the answer. So what you have is a fan base who got unbelievably spoiled over a period of 20 years. Right. And the problem is that 20-year period are the adults in the room now. Okay. So a lot of us grew up, I'm in my later 30s, but I grew up in the Spurrier era. Right. And then I saw the Meyer era. Okay. Now I'm a grown up. Right. And so what about from 1906 to 1990? Well, not much. Okay, so the problem is that old school Florida fans, they get it. Those who are around with Charlie Pell, they understand, and they're telling the rest of us, hey, chill, right? Things are not that bad. You understand, we've gone through a lot worse. But Florida fans that grew up when I did, we're going, no, we're national contenders every year. Right. We're right there with Bama. We're not. And so I think that as much as I love the Gators, and I wish we were, we're not. We've won 3 national titles since 1906.
Amazingly enough, you talk about Charlie Pell. We had Galen Hall in there for a short period of time, and they had to share that title with Tennessee, and everybody's making a big deal. Oh, they shouldn't have got. I don't know how that whole mess thing. But you bring up an interesting about spoiled fan bases. And I'm from Metro Detroit, okay? And a lot of the young millennials got used to the Red Wings making the playoff 25 years in a row. And all of a sudden, now the last few years, okay, they haven't made the playoffs, so they didn't know any other way. So I can certainly relate from a Motown perspective what you Gators are going through, that when you set your expectations high, you don't seem to want to come down. And the group of coaches that you went out there and listed were pretty good. I like it when Mancini goes ahead and puts his finger wagging like a dog. That means he wants to talk. Okay, talk, doggy.
Well, where's Joakim Noah when you need him? I mean, look at that basketball program. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, the Gators.
Ohio State in both sports same year. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, Billy Donovan, he's pretty good too, but he's with the Bulls, so I will stand point. But I'm with you, because Mancini does know a little something about the Gators. That's why I brought up Yannick Noah. Good stuff, Mark. I knew I could count on you to throw a change up in your podcast, and you did exactly that. All right, Johnny, stay on point, my friend. Somebody does, at least when you have a pulse of what's going on. So I guess really what you're trying to tell me, John, is that everything is pretty incredibly too high. Is that correct?
Yeah. No, I think they're way too high. Even when you look at some programs that have more national titles, you look at like an Ohio State, they went about 33, 34 years without winning a national championship. And yet, nobody looks at Ohio State or looks at them differently. The fact is that Nick Saban has made winning titles in the SEC. He's made it look so feasible, so attainable, that when you're not there, and you've been there before, especially in Florida's position, having beaten Saban back in the day with Meyer, there's this expectation, there was this hope that didn't materialize. And because that hope didn't materialize, I think we're just seeing a lot of fans that are still, they haven't let it go. You're seeing Saban there, and they're going, that should be Florida. Meyer should have never left. That should be us. But it's not. And so I think that we need to look at, instead of trying to find some savior to come in and do a 1-year turnaround, we need to look at building for the future. And if it takes 3, 4, even 5 years to get to that elite level, let's do it. And let's stop firing coaches every 3 or 4 years and trying to find somebody else. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have fired Dan Mullen. I probably would have fired him before Strickland did, but not because of his win-loss record. It was a character flaw that I saw there, but that's a different story. But I think that we need to look at, as somebody like Billy Napier, see what he did at Louisiana Lafayette, and the way his former players, the town, parents, everybody, the university, just sing his praises. My following has grown exponentially from Louisiana Lafayette fans just wanting to follow Napier because of how much they love the man, not just the coach, the guy. And that's why I think, as I wrote before the season, I said rather bluntly to Florida fans, we don't deserve Billy Napier. We're the way that we act, we don't deserve a coach like this. This guy is the real deal. He is here to build. He is here to work. He's not here to for gimmicks.
Yeah, Ron Zook definitely got a bad deal over there. And again, when you're following somebody like he did. Before I get to you, though, Mark, now that you brought up Dan Mullen, we're going to address this topic a little sooner than I thought because you talked about the character flaw. So can you see, John, Dan Mullen ever becoming a future coach? If he goes to the NFL, it's his assistant, whether he can handle it or not. But what about, let's say, at the college level at a much smaller institution? Do you see Dan Mullen as a future coach, whether it's pros or college for that matter?
I think if Dan Mullen is going to do what's best for him and a program, it would be in the capacity of a coordinator. I don't think he should ever be a head coach, period. I really don't. I think, this is not just conjecture on my part anymore. I was able to confirm it with a lot of players. He lost the locker room. Many players said they felt like he didn't even know their names. He didn't care about them at all. Dan Mullen is one of the worst coaches I think we have ever had at Florida. And I know what he did in terms of offense. I know what he did in terms of his wins. Hey man, I was cheering him on. When we were going to the Orange Bowl, I was right there. I believed in him. I was excited about his arrival at Florida. I was excited about the hire. I was all on board. My problem was not on the field. It was off the field. The guy just, as soon as he got his contract extension, I felt like he just tossed a grenade at our program and just did not care. He wanted to get fired. He knew what would be in it for him. And that's why he was smiling like a clown every time we got beat by a team we should have beaten. He's going to midfield like he just won the lottery. Fans are unbelievably upset. I will tell you this. When Muschamp left, there were a lot of Muschamp defenders.
Okay.
When McElwain was gone, not so much. It was just kind of like, why'd we hire that guy in the first place? And it was just move on. It wasn't bitter, though.
Right.
Mullen, I have never seen more vitriol towards a former coach than I see from a lot of the fan base towards Mullen. And it's because we all have eyes in our head. We saw what he did. We saw the way that he did it. And it reeked of narcissism. It reeked of, I'm in it for me. I don't care about anybody else. And I got what I want now,
Well, didn't you say he burned a few bridges in Mississippi as well?
Oh, yeah, because Mississippi actually loved the guy. He had really, it's my understanding that he had dishes named after him, sandwiches named after him, and Mississippi. They loved him. They never wanted Dan to leave, and he had reassured him that he wasn't going to go anywhere, and he still has a special relationship. It seems like with Dak Prescott, but that was the kind of system and the kind of place that would allow Dan to come in, but Mississippi State fans, I mentioned how Louisiana Lafayette fans have come over to Florida to watch Billy. There was none of that for Mississippi State. And it's not just because, but you got to understand that's an SEC opponent, so they wouldn't come over. No, Mississippi State's never won anything. Okay. They're not, it's not as if he left LSU to come to us, right? They just were happy to be in bowls. Okay. Mississippi State fans let Dan Mullen have it when he left. And I remember thinking and hoping as a Gators fan, okay, this is just because they're jealous, right? They're just saying all this stuff because they're mad they lost him. That's what this is. No, it wasn't that. Because in hindsight, and trust me, that he could say, I'll come back and work for free. And I would say, you know what? Never as a head coach. Never as a head coach. Offensive coordinator, yeah, absolutely. I think he would be great in that position. And I honestly believe that some people are just built for that kind of supportive role, and they're not there to lead an entire program. And I think that's who Dan Mullen is. I think he's an offensive coordinator. And, hey, he seems to have fun on TV, so good for him.
Well, so if I gave you the word quirky, would that be a very good way to describe Dan Mullen, or do you have a better adjective?
Quirky?
Quirky.
Oh, yeah, no, quirky would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I have never seen, Randy Quaid's character in Christmas Vacation? That's that Cousin Eddie. That's who our fan base. That's when our fan base talks about Dan Mullen. That's who we call him.
That's funny.
Interesting. All right, Avi, Mark, you want to add to the Dan Mullen conversation? I know you guys are patiently waiting while Johnny gives it to you.
I don't have much to say on Dan Mullen. I definitely agree. He was definitely a cancer while he was there.
Yeah.
If you don't have respect to the locker room, you're not remembering players' names, you shouldn't be there. I mean, it's not good for your look. It's not good for what you're there for what they brought you in for. So what are you gonna do? I definitely believe he shouldn't be there. So
I can tell you one fan base that doesn't like Dan Mullen, the Michigan Wolverines. He beat them twice, once at Mississippi State and once in Florida. But I had to get that analogy out there. I'm from Motown, so all right, Mark. You've been a very good sponge today, Mark. I'll give you a medal and a gold-plated sponge here, because I know that this is definitely, if there's ever a time you're a fish out of water, when you bring up a Yannick Noah basketball analogy, at least you get your due here, and your listening skills have been very good tonight, Mark. So what do you want to say about that?
Well, I appreciate it. And I think the bar has been set in Tuscaloosa with all these coaches. I really do. I mean, you look at all of them across the board, and before the season, you're chasing Nick Saban there. Regardless of you coming in, you're seeing that with Brian Kelly at LSU. He had a cream puff job at Notre Dame. He comes down to, the Bayou City there, and you see I think the smartest guy in this whole thing was Lincoln Riley. He figured, I'm heading out west and building a program where I can be a little unnoticed here. And not many people turn into the Pac-12 network, but I think the big thing is you got to have stability in your program. You got to lay the groundwork, and you got to have structure. And now that Mullen's out of there, now we see what these teams can do. But until you get Nick Saban out of Alabama, I think you're all chasing the big dragon.
That's okay. Well, you're probably right. All right, so let's keep the conversation in the state of Florida, college-wise. Then we're going to finish it with the Miami Dolphins. All right, Florida State 4 up, 2 down, lost 19-17 to number 14 North Carolina State, 5 up, 1 down. Now, obviously, John, Mike Norvell's done a really good job of FSU coach, and I love the analogy that you gave me earlier that Jimbo Fisher left similar to Urban Meyer, and there wasn't closure. So what I'd like you to do, John, is explain that, provide more clarity to that, please.
Yeah. So, and a lot of this is just speculation on my part, but I just speak as a fan, not as some insider or expert. But so I'll speak from the heart on it. I think, when Urban Meyer, when Tim Tebow was leaving, he had Cam Newton ready to go. When Cam Newton had the whole stolen laptop debacle and ended up getting kicked out of Florida, behind him was John Brantley. And no offense to John Brantley, I'm sure he's a great guy, but Urban knew that he didn't have what he needed in a John Brantley. John Brantley couldn't move out of the pocket. So long story short, there was this massive, blow up. He missed time with his family. He was having chest pains. And so he leaves Florida. Well, it was heartbreaking, but at the same time, a lot of Gators fans, we thought, well, man, if that's legit, if he's having heart issues and he's really missing his family, we wish him the best. when he ended up at Ohio State shortly thereafter, that changed the tune in Gainesville majorly. And I've seen a lot of the same thing with Jimbo Fisher. Now, he didn't pull the Red Fox deal. He didn't start, saying he's having all these health problems. But the way things became kind of scandalous with Urban Meyer at Florida, not only with what was happening there with Cam Newton, but there was these, at the time, whispers about things with Aaron Hernandez. Nothing nearly as big as it would become, but it's on record that NFL coach called Urban Meyer and said, what would you say about Aaron Hernandez? And Urban's response to him was, "Don't touch the guy. I'm telling you, don't touch him." And he was saying that because he was concerned for the coach, not because he was concerned for Aaron. So there was a lot going on behind the scenes that we didn't know about that was probably causing the chest pains. I would have had them too, I'm sure. But Jimbo Fisher leaving Florida State, it was kind of the same thing in that there was all these little whispers of all this stuff going on around Florida State. And Jameis Winston and Jimbo did not seem to, oddly enough, winning a title, they did not seem to really like one another. They didn't really seem to gel with one another. And so it was like two enemies came together to fight, to fight a common enemy. And they win it all. And then, Jameis kind of has a thing with the crab legs and all that fun stuff. But anyway, so Jimbo leaves Florida State, leaves a bad taste in their mouth. And Florida State, like Florida, is like, that's okay. We're going to get somebody just as good or better than Jimbo. And both schools ended up eating a massive humble pie. So the problem is, I liken it to a lopsided breakup. So some girl dumps you. She says, it's not you, it's her. She's really distraught. She just needs to focus on herself and her career right now. And then next month you see her with the captain of the football team hanging down the street, and she's madly in love. And that was kind of like Urban Meyer with Florida. It was like, it's not Florida. I love the Gators. It's just my health. It's just my family. And hey, Ohio State, I'm coming. So I think like Jimbo Fisher, it was the same thing for Florida State fans. I know some Florida State fans they've expressed that sentiment, that they weren't happy with the way that went down. And since then, like Florida, the program just kind of turned into a dumpster fire for a while. Right. And now you have Mike Norvell there trying to put the pieces back together. And the same way that I feel like Billy Napier is now, even though the time period was separate for about 4 years, by about 4 years, 4 or 5 years, we find ourselves now kind of adjacent with one another. I feel like Mike Norvell is going to do good things for Florida State. I really do. I hope not because I'm a Gators fan, but right. I do think that. And I think that Billy Napier is the right guy for Florida.
Well, amazingly enough, Willie Taggart's the guy you were referring to. So that was a situation where Florida Atlantic's getting him cheap because Florida State paying for most of it. And FAU's paying whatever the bare minimum is because Willie was able to leave Tallahassee and it goes to Boca Raton. Not a bad trade-off, I guess, if you can afford it. And you're being paid by the program that resides in the state capital. That's pretty interesting stuff. Yeah, but I guess you could say that when and they were on Mike Norvell a little bit last year too, but I'm glad that they were able to let cooler heads prevail. And I do believe Mark Norvell is the right guy to get things straightened out in Tallahassee. Mark, well, anything you want to add to that?
Well, if you compare Urban Meyer and Jimbo Fisher there, I think I'm taking Urban Meyer any day of the week. The programs he's turned around. I know he went to the pros and, like Saban went to the Dolphins. They're not cut out for the pros. We've seen that in college basketball with Calipari and Pitino and Tarkanian. These guys aren't cut out. They're cut out for college game. But I'm not a big fan of Jimbo. I mean, what has Jimbo Fisher done at Texas A&M to, he's always talking about going head to head against Nick Saban and everything, but I'm just not a big fan of Jimbo Fisher.
Well, the only thing I'll say to that, Mark, is I thought that Texas A&M made a mistake letting Kevin Sumlin go, but I want to keep things on track. That's all I want to do, so that we do.
I agree.
Yeah, I think they did. The records are comparable, and the end result is neither of them has a national championship. I think they would have gotten there quicker if they didn't give up on someone prematurely.
Yep.
I mean,
Totally
that's
agree.
that's what I think. Avi, what else you want to add to that?
Just a little note on the Florida State loss. Another tough loss after one last week. FSU really's got to get back to the drawing board. When you got something going in the first half, you really gotta finish off. You got to continue doing what you're doing. That second half, they were invisible. They just couldn't get anything going. NC State really disguised their defense really well, was really putting pressure in there, so Florida State really didn't have a chance to get anything going. If I had to mark on one thing, they need to get some better consistent play out of Travis.
Yeah.
Travis he's got to be mistake-free if they're going to want to win. They got to continue doing what they're doing. They just got to stay mistake-free. Also, penalties. 100 yards and 10 penalties for FSU the other day. If you're going to win a ball game, that is not how you're going to do it. Florida State needs to hit the drawing board, see what they can really get going. They got a big game coming up. See if they can get it done.
All right. By the way, a little more activity in the chat room. Good. Thanks for joining us, Coach Dante. I work with him 2-3 times a week during the day. So glad you're checking in. All right. Last topic of the night. Now we're going to go to the pro level. The Miami Dolphins are in a quarterback country. So let's weigh in, John, on the Tua situation. Teddy Bridgewater and Tua, two guys that both can't stay healthy and have track records that don't allow them to stay healthy. Enter Skylar Thompson, Miami Dolphins. So, obviously we know the concussion thing, John. I know they made recent changes to the protocols and all that. So what's your take on the Tua situation, John?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the injury, I was watching the game against the Bengals too when he went down, and I mean, I was just as horrified. I think it's anybody else watching the game. It was terrible to see him, the way his hand was contorting. It immediately caused a reaction, I think, from everybody who was watching, and that's why all of a sudden the doctors came under immense scrutiny. It was like that they did him dirty. They shouldn't have cleared him to play, and on and on. And I don't know. I don't know anything about medical science, so I'm not going to pretend to. I would say, obviously after that concussion, and he was quickly released and allowed to go home with the team, and so that seemed promising. Putting Bridgewater in there, and then boom, Bridgewater goes down, another concussion. And then you put Skylar in there, and I think the only good thing that he did was cost penalties. Defensive pass interference, because he's just slinging it. I mean, and good for him. Good for him. I mean, I don't think that anybody was expecting too much. I certainly wasn't when I saw him go in, and but it's football's obviously, no matter how hard they work to make it a safe game, it's always going to be a violent game. It's always going to be a contact sport. And that's just kind of the risk that you take. I hate it. I hope that Tua gets better. I think the Dolphins have a great season ahead of them if they can get healthy, not just with Tua, not just with Bridgewater, but they have several key guys that are out right now. And I think if they can get healthy, I think Miami will have an excellent season, maybe the best they've had in a very long time. I mean, they ended. I mean, they had a hot streak last year, and I think that they're poised to just take that streak and they started 3-0. I mean, they had it, but when you lose, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 guys, key guys, you're going to suffer. And I think that that's what Dolphins fans are seeing. It's not the same squad, so you can't really expect that streak to continue. And honestly, as a football fan, I mean, I'd rather have that happen now, not later. Hopefully these guys can get healthy and they can stay healthy.
So, John, being an SEC guy, then I'll turn it over to Avi and I'll turn it over to Mark. Okay. Tua drafted 5th overall, Justin Herbert 6th. Do you think that Tua Tagovailoa was worth the number 5 pick? And I know for a while they wanted to tank for the guy, but actually it turns out he fell to him anyway later on. So, but John, when you compare Herbert and Tua, to me, which one do you think which one would you go with? And by the way, Mark Purcell, thank you very much for joining us. keep your phone on. You're going to be coming on baseball pretty soon anyway. So thanks for checking in. So, but back to Tua. Okay, Herbert or Tua? Who would you have taken?
I probably would have taken Tua, and I wouldn't say that because of his college career per se. Just to say, look what he did at Alabama or what, I wouldn't say that. It's not any kind of SEC bias in that regard. I think it's just his skill set. The dude he's remarkable. I mean, he really is. He has the potential. His ceiling, we haven't even seen it yet. I think he has the potential to be. I don't even know who to compare him to, because I feel like all the quarterbacks that are like him either got injured and they never did hit that ceiling, or they didn't have the talent around them. I think that we're going to see Tua possibly kind of be a trailblazer in the sense of setting a new standard possibly.
Well, it's a fair assessment. I think the only thing Tua has to do is somehow find a way to play an entire season without injury, and it doesn't.
That's the trick.
Yeah, we haven't seen that right away. Avi, give me some quick thoughts about Tua.
Well, look, Tua's got all the intangibles you want. IQ off the charts. You just wish he was a little bit bigger, a little bit taller, as they say, right? But listen, the guy's got to stay on the field. Durability is a huge issue right now. Obviously, now we've literally went through our two backups. We see what we got behind Tua. We need Tua we need him on the field. It's not even a question. And back to the Herbert Tua question, I agree 100%. You go with Tua. He's got the intangibles. He's a winner. He's a game manager. But again, we drafted him knowing that there was problems with getting injured. It was durability. So that was the chance we're willing to take after all the years of all the stuff and quarterbacks we've went through. We're willing to take that chance. The guy's an awesome football player. He's finally proven the critics wrong the last couple of years that said he just didn't have the ability. You know what? He didn't have an opportunity to show his ability. You know why? Because he keeps getting injured.
Yep.
Like you said, one full season of him healthy, I'm telling you, he's gonna turn heads. And one last thing, if you wanted to if there was one person in the NFL you may be able to compare him to, and obviously I think his best attribute is his accuracy and obviously his size, I would say he's like a left-handed Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's one of the most accurate quarterbacks I've seen in years. Obviously, he's on a downtrek a little bit, but you never know with the guy. He's a very talented guy. IQ is very high. I feel the same exact way about Tua, but again, we got to see Tua on the field. That's all. That's what we got to see.
For all the games, Avi.
Yes, every game.
ALL, okay?
Yes.
48 point, all, ALL. Of course, I'm really good at spelling, okay? But I'm with you. But I like the Russell Wilson analogy. All right, Madman.
Well, here's my take on it. Bill Walton was a hell of a basketball player if you can keep him healthy. And I think that's the same way I look at Tua. You got to keep him on the field. But let's face it, boys. I mean, you're down there. I grew up with Bob Greasy, and then he was handed off to Dan Marino, and we haven't seen a quarterback since.
Right.
So, and we've talked a lot on this show about guys like Jason Taylor and Zach Thomas. I haven't seen that on defense. Yeah, Waddle I like. Tyreek Hill bringing in, but the Dolphins to me right now they're at a crossroads here. Minnesota's coming in Sunday, and if you lose that game, then you're on the Mendoza line. It's not a division where you're sitting there with the Houstons and the Indianapolises and the Jacksonville's trying to justify yourself. You're in a division where you're looking at Buffalo and New England, and the Jets are starting to believe in themselves.
That's true. Good points, Mark. Yeah, the main thing is to stay healthy in that division and get either. And I like the progress that the Jets are actually making too. I like Zach Wilson. I always have. Robert Saleh in his second year. I wouldn't go out there and give the New England Patriots any false sense of security beating the Lions 29-0. Need to show me a little bit more. It pains me to say that, but it is what it is. So, and I think that we're still looking at that two-headed monster, Patricia and Judge. And if I can figure out that situation, then the Rubik's Cube would be the easiest puzzle on the planet to solve. We know darn well it isn't. So,
Detroit's struggling with injuries too. If they can get everybody back on the field. You're going to be
Probably at
doing
this point in time, you know what? Everybody's struggling with injuries. The question is just who you have better players with. So, meanwhile, just, you know, this fire up Florida. Glad to be joined by John Carosello, our special guest tonight with the Florida Gators. John, really enjoyed having you on the show tonight. So I'm going to go over some company information in a moment, but any closing thoughts about your first experience with us?
Man, I honestly, I'm just honored being on the same platform with you guys. It's been a lot of fun hanging out and getting to hear your insights. So really astute insights from you guys, and just appreciate you having me on, Scott.
Looking forward to having you back. Subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel, or visit www.southfloridatribune.com and follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. To advertise, call 954-304-4941. The audio portion of the show can be heard on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. If you have a hard time accessing our Twitter channel through the website, by all means, feel free to do so by going to youtube.com. Look for South Florida Tribune, hit the subscribe button. You'll be able to see all the shows we have. Mark, anything you want to add to this?
No, John was great. Avi was great. You're great, man. What a show, man. It's a show that's sweeping the country. And just to throw a little gas back on that Lion fire, lead the league in offense and lead the league in defense as far as giving up points. So you gotta find a happy medium.
That's okay, Mark. Remember one thing: you have a little geography problem tonight. You're not on fire up Michigan.
No, I know. I just had to throw that in.
I know. You know, that to me was that comment was like a waffling duck. Okay, so we're going to leave the waffling duck part of what it is and make sure that Mr. Madman, who's in Southern California, is attempting to think he's on fire up Michigan, but realize that fire up Florida is what it is. We have a Florida Gator instead of a Michigan Wolverine. But nice try, Mark. It's okay. It's all good, buddy. But at any rate, you know, with that said, waffling duck, you know, Mark Mancini, the longer I work with you, I'll have more nicknames than politicians have lives. So stick around for a while. See if you can go ahead and handle a few more that I'm going to throw your direction. But I will say this, so Mark gets it a lot anyways, because I deal with him on Saturday, on Sports Talk Saturday with Mark and Mancini and Bruce Kessinger. We have a whale of time doing that show. So since Mancini likes to throw waffling ducks, I'll throw him the first dibs here about how they can get a hold of them.
Well, you know, XM 203, Sirius 217, WWDB AM 860 out of Philly, and just finished up my second year with the Pittsburgh Pirates. So a blessed man here.
Yeah, you know, I like the way you go ahead and knock all my teams. Just how many games did the Pirates lose this year, Mark?
They lost 100.
Oh, my goodness. They hit the century mark. Enough said. I feel bad. Sorry, Mark, but, you know, you're going to go out there and criticize my Lions. The Pirates don't even go to either, and it's been worse. All right, with that said, Avi Greenwald, now that you're the monkey in the middle between all these insults, and I give it to everybody, Avi, so don't ever take it personal. Give it to us here. Give me your contact.
Well, first, I want to say it was an honor being on with you, John. Absolute phenomenal insight. I loved hearing what you had to say about Florida and FSU football. Can't wait to see you more. You can definitely find me, Greenwald Avi, on Twitter, Avi Greenwald on Facebook. We'll be seeing more coming. Lots of content. Follow me. Let's do this.
Very good. All right, John Carosello. Why don't you give it all to him on Twitter? Because there's a little lesson for everybody out there. I met John Carosello on Twitter, and had a lot of good guests on Twitter that I've met, and John's just the latest in a long line. I'm looking forward to doing more and more projects with John, but why don't you give all your contact information as well, John? You've been nothing short of sensational tonight, and we're so glad to have you.
Well, thanks again, guys. Really, you guys are awesome. You can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/GatorsThings. Find me on Twitter at GatorsThings, Instagram at GatorsThings. So it's pretty much my handle. If you're trying to contact me, you can get a hold of me on any of those platforms. I'd appreciate a follow, like, shares. I put a lot of the articles of what I'm building on Facebook, so sharing those articles helps a lot. I appreciate, again, the opportunity to come on here and then to put that plug out there. Thank you very much.
Oh, John, it's my pleasure. Also, a little shout out to Candy Abling. Does an unbelievable job with the South Florida Tribune. So, you know, Candy, we all appreciate everything that you do to help us keep the platform afloat. And if you want to email us, feel free to do so, southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And as I aforementioned, you can follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. And please, once again, subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. So this concludes this edition of Fire Up Florida. So on behalf of John Carosello, Avi Greenwald, and Mad Mancini, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll catch you the next time. Take care, everybody. Go out there and be safe. God bless, and thanks for joining us. Good night now.